due to the glare, or you're trying something different. If it bothers you, join the club. I don't like having you this close to my face either. Hi guys, it's V Renee. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. I promise you probably won't be this close by the end of this video. I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm literally looking at you like this so you can't see my double chin. But anyway, I wanted to talk to you guys today about something that I've been thinking about ever since I started querying Civil Blood about 2 years ago. Part of marketing your book or querying your book, all that kind of stuff, is figuring out your category, your genre, and your subgenre. And it can be really, really difficult. So I just wanted to talk about what the differences are between those things, how you can kind of gauge where you fall, and things like that. I had to move it back. Let's get into how we can put our works of art into neat little boxes for the publishing industry. The first question you want to ask yourself is, what is your category? Or what's a category, period? Basically, a category is, for fiction, for literature, is just who the book is for. So NA, YA, middle grade, fiction, nonfiction, it's who the book is for. Fiction, obviously, big umbrella. Did you make the book up? Then it's fiction. If you didn't, it's nonfiction. If it's featuring people in high school, it's probably young adult. If it's featuring people in college, it's probably new adult.
Which is sadly a floundering market that I think we could use a lot more of, but doesn't get the recognition it deserves anyway.
Your series, if you're writing a series, might change categories. Harry Potter started as a middle grade for kids between like 8 and 12, 7 and 12, and then because the characters aged up, it turned into a young adult by about book 3 or 4. So it could change, but basically you want to figure out what demographic you're writing for. So young adults like 12 to 18, middle grades like 8 to 11, children's younger than 8, new adults like 18 to 24. Anything above that is just fiction. It's just adult fiction. If you don't know what your category is, look at the comps for your book. And now you're asking me what comps are. Comps are books that you can use as examples to query in your query for agents and publishers, etc. To kind of say, hey, this is the feel of my book. This is the tone of my book. This is like popular books that my book is kind of like. That way they get an idea of, oh, that's what we want to publish. That's what we want to represent. Those are the kind of books that we like. Those are the kind of books that we like to sell.
But how do I know my comps if I don't have a genre?
I'm getting there, I know. The genre of your story is the content-based category that your story falls into. So, big genres: fantasy, science fiction, horror, mystery, romance, dystopia now. There are some pretty easy ways to establish outright genre. It's subgenre that is a tricky little bitch. Fantasy deals with fantastical elements. Sci-fi deals with those, but make it scientific. Romance deals with romantic elements. But my book does 3/4 of those things. Bitch, me too, you're not special. That's why I'm talking about subgenres are essential. Those genres overlap often, especially in YA. And what is a subgenre? It's a subcategory of the genre. It's literally in the name. What are some examples of subgenres? Magical realism, high fantasy, contemporary fantasy. There's also speculative fiction, which is kind of like its own genre umbrella that deals with supernatural, fantastical, futuristic, all that kind of stuff. But the laws of the world are different than the world that we live in. Sorry, my camera died, but I was being a rambling mess anyway. Basically, there are different types of fantasy, and it's easy to not really understand which one you fall into. So like contemporary fantasy, that's a book where it's set against the backdrop of the real world, and the magic or the sort of fantastical element is sort of underground, a sort of secret. So Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, even my own stories can be considered contemporary fantasy. And then there's sort of fairy tale fantasy, which is really popular right now. It's sort of the fairy tale retellings, the Sea Witch, Cinder, and those rely heavily on mythical folklore and kind of take from the motifs and themes of that. Don't really focus on like storytelling timeline arc, as it were, in like today's terms, and they really kind of follow the fairy tale storytelling devices. And then you have high fantasy, which is usually an epic battle of good and evil in a fantastical world. Like if I gotta go through a goddamn fairy hole in the tree or into the elf dimension, your shit is high fantasy, okay? Magical realism is a little more difficult to kind of nail down. It's much more realistic than other fantasy types. It uses magical elements to kind of reinforce commentary on real life. So a book like Love in the Time of Cholera. Then you have romantic fantasy, which is exactly what it sounds like, and the ACOTAR books are a perfect example of romantic fantasy.
But ACOTAR also has elves or fairies or whatever that book is about.
And yes, I know, subgenres overlap, like Civil Blood is a paranormal romance, contemporary fantasy, thriller with like speculative fiction thrown in there. It's set in today's time. The magic is a secret. There's a romantic plot. It commentates on some allegories and themes. And then my current WIP could basically be considered magical realism, because like the magic is very much secondary, but it's also got like huge threads of dystopia, and you know how I feel about dystopia, and I even saying that my book is like dystopian-esque. So subgenres are hard. In conclusion, it is very difficult sometimes to figure out what subgenre you're writing, although by the time you're querying and looking for an agent, you have a really good idea of sort of the realm that you're writing in. You'll have a good idea of comparable titles. You'll have a good idea of where you kind of fall on the spectrum of all these subgenres, and what usually you want to pick like one that really stands out. Like when I really had to promote Civil Blood, even though it's all the things I mentioned before, I just went with paranormal romance, because that is what it is at its core. It's paranormal creatures who love each other. That is what happens. There's very scary elements. There's commentary on the real world. There's lots of bits and pieces of other subgenres, but at the core, it is what it is. So I hope that cleared up kind of how you figure out what your subgenres are. I'm sure it didn't, because I'm a rambling mess at this point, but I really wanted to mention this because it is very hard and it can change, and the sun is changing too. So I'm gonna go. I make new videos every single Wednesday. Catch me next Wednesday with some new content for you guys, and I'll see you then.